Hello, everybody, and welcome to SportSource, your number one source of sports. And today we're going over my 2019 and 2020 Nhl Standings Predictions for the regular season. Now, the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to go each division: Atlantic, Metro, Central, and then we're going to go finally with the Pacific Division. We're going to go through all of them. I'm going to rank from 8 to 1 on where I think they're going to finish in the regular season. Now, just keep in mind, these are my lists, my opinions. You could leave your own down in the comment section below. Hockey is just such an unpredictable sport that anything can happen. You know, if you have said some of the stuff last season that would have happened, that before it actually happened, then I would have thought you were crazy. Like the Blues winning the cup when they were the last place team in January, all these different things. The Islanders doing as good as they did after they lost to Tavares. It's just so unpredictable that anything could happen. And I played it a little bit too safe, I feel like, but this is just my thoughts, my opinions, and I did a bold predictions video, so that's where all those bold predictions are. But here are my actual predictions. Not a lot of risks here. I took some risks, but also with the RFA situation, there's so many RFAs that haven't been signed yet. For the sake of this video, they all went back to their original teams. But before we begin the list, smash that like button and subscribe for more NHL news and discussions. Without further ado, let's begin the video. At number 8 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Ottawa Senators. Now, they were one of the worst teams in the league last season. They didn't have their own first-round pick, so that kind of sucks. And they didn't drastically improve their roster, but they also didn't get worse. Their young guys are going to do good. You got Brady Tkachuk, who is going to take that mantle as their best forward. You got some young guys like Batherson that could step up. But overall, there's just not a lot of good talent on this team. There's not really lots of depth. There's not enough top-end talent, and they're looking like they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league next season, but it's good because they're rebuilding. They're not supposed to be that good. Not every team needs to be competitive, and Ottawa is just one of those teams that I don't think will be competitive at all. They're going to use their young guys a lot. They're going to just make sure that they learn from their experiences, play them a lot, and hopefully they could develop into future stars someday. At number 7 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Detroit Red Wings. Now, their future is very bright. They have guys like Moritz Seider, they got Dylan Larkin, Michael Rasmussen, all these great young players, Evgeny Sveshnikov. They also got Philip Zadina. But, they're in a rebuild mode right now, and they are in full rebuild mode. They're not very good. Their cap, lots of their big contracts are going to come off the books soon. They're not really supposed to be competitive right now. Larkin is a very good player. He got 73 points last year, 78 points. He got in the 70s in points, but I don't think that it's enough to carry them to the playoffs. Their defense is weak. Their offensive depth is weak. Everything is it's just not a very strong team. Even though they held a playoff streak from 1990 to 2016, I can't see them making the playoffs this year, especially in a really good division. At number 6 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Buffalo Sabres. Now, for a short period of time last season, the Sabres were first in the league in points. And for me, there's nowhere to go but up. These young guys like Eichel and Dahlin and Reinhart, they will only improve. And I could see them being a wild card team. Maybe that surprises everyone. Don't be surprised if they do that. I'm just playing it safe by putting them at 6, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Buffalo came right out the gate, played really good, and consistently kept their ground like they did last season, how they started out really hot, but then just kept that going throughout the whole season. Now, the biggest problem for me is the goaltending, and they have one of the worst goaltending situations in the league with Carter Hutton. He is not a great goalie at all, and also their depth is not very strong compared to lots of other teams, especially in the division. But if they could step it up, I could see the Sabres surprising a lot of people this upcoming season. At number 5 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Montreal Canadiens. Now, this team stayed the same, and I could expect the same success that they had last season. All the guys are coming back that they had: Domi, Tatar, Gallagher, Weber. They're all coming back, and hopefully they'll be healthy throughout the whole season. But they're in a division where the top teams are so dominant and on another level that I think that they will miss the playoffs despite them having more points than a Western team that makes it. At number 4 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Boston Bruins. Now, I think that we can all expect a slight decline for the Bruins after a long cup run that lasted till June. Even though they didn't come out with the cup, they still made it there. And, they had a shortened summer as well. And as well as their older core players like Chara and Bergeron and Marchand and Rask, they're not getting any younger. But regardless, I could still see the Boston Bruins as a wild card team in the Atlantic Division this upcoming NHL season. Coming at number 3 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Toronto had a busy offseason, which brought in a lot of new changes, and they also lost a lot of guys. But most notably, who they added was Tyson Barrie. This team's biggest issue last season was goals against and consistency, and Tyson Barrie, I think, just adds so much more to that team. He can add consistency to their power play, which they struggled with at the end of last season, which was one of their big problems. And if they can improve at these things, the talent is there to be a powerhouse in the Atlantic Division and just in the Eastern Conference in general next season. At number 3 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Florida Panthers. Now, even though they did miss the playoffs last season, I'm still very, very high on this team. Probably higher than most other people. They signed Joel Quenneville, who's an amazing coach. You know, he was there for the Chicago Dynasty, and he's one of my favorite coaches in the NHL. They signed Bobrovsky, who's one of the best goalies in the league. And they also had some nice supporting pieces like Antoine Strawman, Brett Connolly. But this team's offense has also proven to be one of the best in the league with Huberdeau, Dadonov, Barkov, and Hoffman, and Trocheck. And also, you have all that being said, I can see the Panthers as the second best team in the division, as well as maybe even being Stanley Cup contenders. If you look at my bold predictions video, I had them as a Stanley Cup finalist, so we're going to have to see how that all plays out. But yeah, I'm higher on this team than most people. They're one of the greatest off seasons in the whole NHL, and I just think that they're going to come right out the gate and be an amazing team in the Atlantic Division. And finally, at number 1 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, even though they did disappoint some people in the playoffs, or they disappointed everyone in the playoffs last season, they've still proven to be the best team in the regular season consistently. And unless something bad happens, I can't see their regular season dominance stopping anytime this season. They still have Hedman, they still have Kucherov, they still have Stamkos. We're assuming Brian Point comes back. They have Vasilevsky. The talent is there. They just can't get it done in the playoffs, and I see no reason why they shouldn't get it done in the regular season next season as well. Moving on to the Metro, at number 8, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, after upsetting the seamlessly unbeatable Tampa Bay Lightning, their top-end players still left in free agency like Bobrovsky, Duchesne, and Panarin to play elsewhere. Now, this team isn't terrible, but with a rookie goaltender, lack of depth, and lots of youth, it's hard to see the Blue Jackets achieve anything in a very competitive division. At number 7 in the Metro, I have the New York Islanders. Now, after an amazing season that came out of nowhere, they didn't change their roster at all, except for replacing Lehner with Varlamov and adding in Valtteri Filppula. But in a division that went through a lot of changes, the Islanders didn't improve their roster, which may be their biggest downfall. It also may be their biggest strength because they're bringing this team back together. But, you know, in a division that changes so much, in a league like hockey where teams change a lot, you know, I also think that that might be their biggest downfall. I also think that they might lose the magic that they had going into next season. At number 6 in the Metro, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins. People are very split about the Pittsburgh Penguins this season. Some people have them at the bottom of the division, and others have them at the very top. Me personally, I have them at the bottom for the reason that they barely made the playoffs last season. They got swept in the first round, and that was all with Phil Kessel. And now that he's gone, they replaced Galchenyuk, which isn't an upgrade at all. You know, he's bad defensively. He's not consistent offensively enough. But with an aging, injury-prone core and no cap flexibility whatsoever, thanks to their GM for signing Tanev and Jack Johnson to those big contracts, as well as a tough competitive division, I can see the Penguins' reign at the top coming to an end as soon as next season. At number 5 in the Metro Division, I have the New York Rangers. Now, the New York Rangers had one of the best off seasons in the league by acquiring Kaapo Kakko and Artemi Panarin and Jacob Trouba. Is it enough to make the playoffs? I don't think so. Even though this team is oozing with young talent, I think that the performance of their new players and overall performance of Henrik Lundqvist and their whole goaltending in general will determine this team's success going into the 2019 to 2020 NHL season. At number 4 in the Metro Division, I have the Carolina Hurricanes. After making it to the conference finals and improving their team by adding Erik Haula and Ryan Dzingel, I could see this team repeating their success and building on the success they had last season with the help of Sebastian Aho, Evgeny Svechnikov, Teravainen, and Peter Mrazek, and their elite defensive core, which is filled by Dougie Hamilton, Justin Falk, Jakub Slavin, etc. This team, you know, they, like the Islanders, they didn't change a lot, but I didn't feel like they needed to. They changed enough. They added Holland to Dzingel, which I think were really good acquisitions, and I think that this team can just really compete in this Metro division, even though, in my opinion, is the deepest division in the whole NHL. At number 3 in the Metro Division, I have the New Jersey Devils. Now, the Devils had the best offseason in the NHL, in my opinion, and should be on everyone's radar if they aren't already. Their top 6 forwards are fierce, with Hall, Hischier, Hughes, Palmieri, Simmons, and Bratt leading the way. They also have a good defensive core, with Subban as their go-to guy, looking for a bounce-back year after, you know, a disappointing year with the Nashville Predators. The problem is their goaltending. Is a tandem of Corey Schneider and Mackenzie Blackwood enough to get a job? We'll have to see at the end of the season if it is enough. At number 2 in the Metro Division, I have the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers strengthened their roster this offseason by acquiring Kevin Hayes, Matt Niskanen, and Justin Braun. They have a good offensive core filled with Giroux, Voracek, Nolan Patrick, who I'm expecting a good year out of. You got Travis Konechny and just all those guys. They also have good defensive depth now surrounding Provorov and surrounding Gostisbehere, which they did add in the offseason with Matt Niskanen and Justin Braun. But between the pipes, they are led by a 21-year-old Carter Hart, who I'm expecting a big year out of because we've seen what he did last season. He played amazing. If he can improve on that and just not let the nerves get to him, I can see the Flyers coming out top of all these other teams in the Metropolitan Division next season. And at first place in the Metropolitan Division, I have the Washington Capitals. Even though they did lose some offensive depth, they're still the same dominant Capitals that we seem to see every year. They're led by Ovechkin, Backstrom, Kuznetsov, John Carlson, and Holtby. This team is just so strong. I can't see them really dropping. Age isn't really getting to them yet, even though they have lost some depth. Their depth is still okay, and their top guys I can see having amazing years. Backstrom, Holtby, they're in contract years. They're going to try to do their best. I think that the Capitals are cup favorites as of right now. Moving on to the Central Division, at number 7, I have the Minnesota Wild. Now, the Minnesota Wild aren't a bad team, but in a very strong competitive division, I can't see them doing well. They seem directionless and are stuck in no man's land, and, they're not rebuilding, they're not winning, but I think that it might be best if the Wild tank and try to get a top draft pick in the stacked 2020 NHL draft moving forward. This would help their franchise. They would get young players because in this division, in the Central Division, they're not being competitive. They're not competing, so they might as well tank, maybe try to get the top pick in next year's draft. At number 6 in the Central Division, I have the Chicago Blackhawks, and I think that the Chicago Blackhawks had a very strong, underrated offseason. They had the 3rd overall pick. They made lots of nice moves and are going to be a fun team to watch, but I think that they'll get the short end of the stick in this division, but don't be surprised if Chicago sneaks into the playoffs because that's the talent they have. Their offense is so amazing. They have Taves, Kane, Strome. I'm probably leaving some guys out to Brinkat. Their back end is a little bit weak, but with Robin Lehner, I'm a really big fan of that signing. We've seen what he's done for the Islanders, and if he could just transfer that over to Chicago, I think that this could be a wild card, dark horse playoff team going into next season. Coming at number 5 in the Central Division is the Winnipeg Jets. Now, even though I am a Winnipeg Jets fan, I do admit that I don't have high expectations for this team next season. They lost a lot of players and didn't really get anyone back other than Neil Pionk, and they still have that deadly top 6. But if they rely too much on their depth and don't perform to expectations, it could be very bad news for the Winnipeg Jets team. Hellebuck, if he could bounce back, because he had that amazing season, then he had an okay season, so it wasn't that great. Their defense looks really rough. If Byfuglien gets injured, then that's kind of bad for them because, he's had a big injury history and there's not a lot of defensemen on their depth chart after that could really step up to the plate. But hopefully they do good because I'm a Winnipeg Jets fan, but I don't have too much hope for this team moving forward. At number 4 in the Central Division, I have the Colorado Avalanche. Now, lots of people are really high on the Avalanche and think that they could win the Stanley Cup, but I like where I have them. They still have their top line. They improved their scoring depth, but the difference maker, I think, will be their defense and goaltending. With Barry gone, they are putting a lot of trust into the rookies, Cale Makar and Bowen Byram, along with another young defenseman in Sam Girard. Goaltending-wise, they're putting Grubauer into a position he's never been in before, a consistent starting goaltender. I think he could do really good, but as you know, the NHL is so unpredictable. He could do really well like I project, or he could do okay, or he could do really, really bad. But if these players don't meet their expectations, these very high expectations that people have put on them, it can make a big difference on their whole season in general coming into the 2019-2020 NHL season. At number 3 in the Central Division, I have the Dallas Stars. Now, after making it to the second round of the playoffs last season, the Stars decided to add more experience to their team by adding vets in Corey Perry and Joe Pavelski. This team was already very, very strong last year, and I think that they can only get better with all their new additions. Plus, they still have Jamie Benn, who I think can bounce back. Plus, they have Tyler Seguin. Plus, they have Radulov. Plus, they have Klingberg, Heiskanen, Ben Bishop. This team looks very strong, and, even though I only have them 3rd in the division, I think that they could potentially win the Stanley Cup, and they're one of my top picks for winning the Stanley Cup next season. At number 2 in the Central Division, I have the St. Louis Blues. Now, the reigning Cup champions are coming into the new season with the literal exact same roster that they had last season, and they're looking to defend their championship. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Binnington, we could see if he has a sophomore slump season. It's either people are saying that he's going to do really good, improve himself as a top 5 goalie in the league, I've heard some people say, but I've also heard some people say that he's going to have a terrible year. We're going to have to see what he does coming into the next season. They have guys like Ryan O'Reilly, Perron, Steen, all these guys. They're just going to have some youth more in there, and I think that they're just more hungrier to defend their title. Last season they upset a lot of people. I hope they don't take a step back because they've already won the Stanley Cup. I hope that they can just have that mindset, keep going, and I have them 2nd in the division. And finally, at number 1 in the Central Division, I have the Nashville Predators. After winning the division last season, they were eliminated by the Stars in the first round, which was very, very disappointing. In the offseason, they lost PK Subban, which wasn't terrible because, they don't need that defense, and he wasn't really doing amazing for them anyway because they already have they have one of the best defensive cores in the league, let's be real. And they want to incorporate Dante Fabro into that, who I think could be an elite defenseman in the NHL. But they also added Matt Duchene to help the Predators' struggling power play and offense. Duchene will help the other talented forwards on this team, like Philip Forsberg, like Victor Arvidsson, and maybe even rookie Eli Tolvanen if he can make the jump this season. For our last division is the Pacific Division, and at number 8, I have the Los Angeles Kings. Now, after a disaster of a season, the LA Kings didn't improve their roster. Unless their older core players bounce back like Kopitar and Doughty and Quick, it might be time to rebuild this once dominant LA Kings team. They already got Alex Turcotte in the draft, and they're trying to build something, but they have one of the weakest prospect pools in the whole NHL, and I just think that this season they should try to tank for a top pick, unless their core guys, have a bounce back year, but that's highly unlikely, and maybe start searching for a trade for those guys. At number 7, I have the Anaheim Ducks. Now, the Ducks are transitioning from their contending team when Getzlaf and Perry were a little bit younger to now a fast youth movement. And because of this, the Ducks might have a learning curve. They still have John Gibson, who's an amazing goaltender, but this team just isn't going to get a lot of wins. They have Lindholm, but the rest of their defensive core, I'm not really a big fan of. But they got lots of young forwards that I'm really excited to see. But yeah, it's not going to really translate into too much wins unless they surprise us. I wouldn't be too surprised, but yeah, they just have so much young talent oozing, and we're going to have to see what they do. But regardless, they still have a decent team and players that could surprise us, but I can't see them finding too much success just yet. Maybe in a couple years they could be at the top of the division, but as of right now, I have them at number 7. At number 6, I have the Edmonton Oilers. Now, the Edmonton Oilers have improved their management and are starting to, take steps in the right direction, but they are still not good enough to be a playoff team, in my opinion, even with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Now, the rest of the team is not supporting McDavid very well. I do not like this team around McDavid whatsoever. They just don't have enough talent. There's some potential there, but, the GM, the coach, they got to step in and try to work with McDavid and these other guys to try to bring them back to the promised land. And it's a shame because the best years of McDavid's career are going to be on a rebuilding team in Edmonton unless they could turn around sometime soon. At number 5, I have the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Canucks young guys are improving, and they had some supporting players like Tyler Myers and JT Miller and Mikael Furland, but also the reason that the season will depend on how their young players step up, like Bo Horvat, like Quinn Hughes, like Besser, like Patterson, and like Demko. They have a really good young core. They also have Gaudette, they have Goldobin, they have Jake Virtanen. All these guys need to step up collectively if they want to make it to the promised land. They did surprise a lot of teams last year, but regardless, they're still developing. They're still trying to find their way. The management is still trying to, support this team, this young core, and I think that they're taking steps in the right direction. I just think that they're just not ready yet to make a big jump in this Pacific Division. At number 4, I have the Arizona Coyotes. Now, the Coyotes were a pleasant surprise last season and added Phil Kessel, who will take over as their point leader and locker room leader. This team is very solid and have a good mix of vets and youth. Don't be surprised if this team makes the playoffs because they were really close last year. They added Phil Kessel, who's an elite goal scorer, one of the best goal-scoring wingers that we have in this league. I know he's getting up there in age, but I think he's going to really gel with mostly Clayton Keller and other guys like that. They've got some nice grit. They got some movement. They're a very well-balanced team. They're not amazing at one particular thing, but they're just a solid overall team that I think could be a surprise to make the playoffs. At number 3, I have the San Jose Sharks. Now, the Sharks are very similar to the Washington Capitals in the sense that even if they lose some key depth players like the Capitals do, and don't replace them very well, they're still a powerhouse, and just that development, people could come up and replace them. They don't need to necessarily sign or trade for a replacement. People could just come in and they could develop them nicely as some key depth people, and they could step up, kind of like the Washington Capitals, but they're still a powerhouse and they don't lose their rhythm. But the big question is how the lack of depth will affect them, and also if Martin Jones can prove himself as a capable goalie after a rough statistical year with the San Jose Sharks. They've got very, very good players, and they could even come out of the West next season. At number 2, I have the Calgary Flames. The Calgary Flames are going to be hungrier for victory after finishing second in the whole league, only to be eliminated in the first round by the Colorado Avalanche. They haven't made much changes to their roster. They replaced Mike Smith with Cam Talbot, but that's not really something too major. They still don't know their starting goal yet. Is it David Rittich? Is it Cam Talbot? We don't know yet, but regardless, they still haven't addressed that goaltender issue that Calgary has had for a long, long time. And if they want to go far in the playoffs, if they want to be a true contender, I think they need to address that goaltending situation ASAP. And lastly, number 1 in the Pacific Division, I have the Vegas Golden Knights. They had to get rid of Colin Miller and Eric Holla to make some cap space, but it won't be too much of a loss because they have Cody Glass, who I think will replace Holla quite nicely. He's got very good potential. He was a top pick a couple years ago. And, this team is already so good already. They're amazing all around, great offense, flurry between the pipes. The only lacking area I could see would be defensively, but even then, it's not a big enough concern to weigh this team down in the grand scheme of things. I think that this team can go to the Stanley Cup Finals legitimately, and I think that they could win the first Stanley Cup in Vegas Golden Knights history. Thank you all for watching. What do you think of this video? Let me know down in the comment section below. Let me know your division rankings, what I get right, what I get wrong. Let me know down in the comment section below your own opinions. Let's debate some stuff. But yeah, that's all for me now. Also, subscribe to join SportSource Nation. But I'll see you in the next one. Take care and goodbye.